Governing Board this September 4th. And I have, he left. Mr. Walmer was going to say the pledge. I have Mr. Diaz lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Walmer, were you hiding from us? We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
You're called on next meeting.
Was that the team?
He was out there doing
Practicing. Roll call, we have Matt Jewett, Donnie Young, and Robin Ferguson, and Tiffany Arenas at the meeting, and we have one absent board member. We want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting and remind the audience of the request to address board cards that must be completed and submitted to the board secretary if they wish to speak to an agenda item. Board policy provides for 2 cards. White cards must be submitted in order to speak to an agenda item, and blue cards must be submitted in order to speak during public comments. Policy also states there is a 5-minute maximum time limit per speaker. Due to open meeting law, board members are not allowed to address the items that are not on the agenda. If you do not want to address the board but wish to give your comments in writing, you can do so on a goldenrod sheet and all members will receive a copy. Approval of agenda. Can I have a motion?
Move the governing board approve the agenda as presented. Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. The next agenda item is approval of minutes from the regular board meeting held August 21st, 2012. Is there a motion?
I move the governing board approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any no public comments at this time? Now for the superintendent's report. Dr. Boyle?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being at our meeting this evening. And I'd like to note that a majority of the people who are attending this evening are principals in Creighton School District, and also we have directors here too this evening, and of course always our representative who does our video for the evening. Thank you, James. What I'd like to do this evening is just review the meetings that are going to be held in September that are important, and also our junior ambassador information for this month. From September 13th through September 28th, our junior ambassador exchange to Germany is taking place. So we know that next week we're going to have a group of students who are going to go on an exchange to Europe. Our next governing board meeting is going to be held at Excellencia School, and it's an important evening. There's an academic achievement study session beginning at 5:30, and the governing board meeting will also be held at Excellencia beginning at 7. And this is one of our recognitions of the year where student academic achievement is recognized. So we expect to have a large group on hand and have selected Excellencia to accommodate that group. That same week, we are beginning our first round of community council meetings that will be held at 6 p.m. at Larry C. Kennedy School. And of course, everyone is invited to attend. I'll stop there because there are going to be many important meetings in the future that we'll be apprising people of. Thank you.
The next agenda item is the approval of consent. Is there a motion?
Move the governing board approve consent agenda items A through E in accordance with policy BED, E-R. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. We have no agenda items for educational services or personnel pupil. Under personnel, we have approval of a retention strategies advisory committee. The background on this item is the administration is recommending that an advisory committee be established to explore retention strategies for Creighton Elementary School District. Do you have more information to add?
We do have someone presenting this evening, and we are now frantically looking for her. She does have a presentation for the board. So I'm going to ask for a favor while we're waiting, because I realize I didn't finish my superintendent's report. So what I would like, thank you. So what I would like to do this evening, because I just got this information, is that to announce that Biltmore Prep is in the news, in the North Central News, the voice of the North Central Phoenix community, the September issue. And on page 31 and 32, the information says that Creighton Elementary School District, Biltmore Prep gets an A rating for the second year. It says, for the second year in a row, Biltmore Prep Academy received an A rating from the Arizona Department of Ed. In fact, with a score of 152, the public school in the Creighton Elementary School District is among the highest scoring schools in the community. And so it's a very nice article that's available, and we'll make sure that we make a copy for the board members. Thank you.
I think the board should commend Faith and the students at Biltmore Preparatory for doing such an outstanding job.
The teachers.
Yes, the
Okay.
teachers, all involved.
And
Yes.
parents.
And the parents and the
Including ones that are also principals.
We'll go back to the approval of a retention strategies advisory committee. Sorry, we moved very quickly today.
Oh, my apologies. I apologize if I'm out of breath here. Scott got me and I dropped my phone and ran on over. So thank you for having me here this evening. I wanted to share with you a concern and a need that I think that's brought before the board of providing an advisory committee to look at teacher retention. You've seen this slide before. This is where we have focused, about 6 years ago, of looking at first making sure all our teachers are highly qualified. Then, as we proceed on with Title II and federal mandates, looking at making sure that we have equitable distribution of our highly qualified teachers. And now, with the new evaluation measurements and piloting it this year, we want to look at making sure that we have effective teachers and equitable distribution of our effective teachers. One of the things that we've noticed is being an inner city school district that we spend a lot of time putting professional development in place, yet we're not able to retain always our most effective teachers. They are recruited and they move on, and so we want to see if there's some measures we can put into place so that we can retain those teachers. So, I'm sorry, okay, so one of the things that policy notes is that we want to be sure to have a representation for the governing board for this advisory committee. My suggestion is that we have the people who participated in what used to be called the 2141 grant, the 2141 committee meeting, and then they became the Title II meeting. That was a mandate for historical knowledge over time. They first wrestled with looking at retention, I think 2 years ago, under the direction of Pam Burkhart. Then we're also looking at having teachers represent from all different grade levels, hard to fill areas, special areas, looking at years of experience, and also different affiliations. Those teachers who were on Career Ladder, and now the Career Ladder is slowly going away, getting their input, getting the CEA's input, Teach for America, and the one acronym you may not recognize is Phoenix Teaching Fellows, which is an organization similar to Teach for America. So the proposed purpose of this committee would be to look at the current trends in the district and research best practices, and then look at where the gaps may be and see if we can make recommendations in order to obtain highly effective teachers in the Creighton School District. Here's a proposed timeline. It's pretty aggressive, but we feel like we want to be able to get something back to the governing board prior to the time when contracts come out, and so perhaps there'll be some things that we can address at that time. And meet and confer also traditionally goes around February. So in September, looking at creating the committee, inviting those people that might be able to give us good insight. And then in October, looking at our current trends, turnover, what types of teachers are likely to turn over and get some staff input. November and December, look at best practices and what other school districts are doing. January, hopefully we can have some insights by then to bring to the governing board and start to get some input there, and then by February making a presentation to the board. The other thing the policy asks for is that if there's support needed, and at this time there's really no support other than, we have the facilities and the clerical support that we need. Any questions?
Off the top of your head, about what is the turnover at this point? Percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise, just under 25% from last year to this year.
Was that higher than other years?
I can't say that. It's really, if you look at the number of new hires, it's been consistent except for the 1 year where we had only like 35 new hires. That's when there was a big scare in the valley and everybody was going through reductions of force. So the number of new hires is not, has not changed over time. I think the demographics of who's turning over, I have a gut feeling, but I don't have the data in front of me, is different. I think we used to be looking at teachers in their 4th, 5th year. Now we're looking at teachers in their 2nd year because I think a lot of it has to do with other areas knowing how well trained our teachers are and recruiting them. I think that's one of the factors.
Will
but not the only.
Will this committee have a goal in mind? Like if it's approximately 25% turnover, will they have a goal in mind to retain 20 or 15? To lower that to a certain percentage, or is it just?
At this time, that has not been explored. I haven't even put that out, but it would be really interesting to put together a SMART goal and see if we can have an effect by a certain period of time. There's so many factors that play into it, from pay, from our pay, making sure we're competitive, and then also making sure that as new teachers enter the system, looking at years of experience and are they granted that, and what are other districts doing. But it's not only pay. A lot of it has to do with site leadership and feeling a sense of belonging from my research that I've done so far.
There was a letter that came out from the ASBA today on the survey of teachers. I think it was ASBA on retention, and it was 54% basically the complaint was low pay. The next one, did you read it? I don't have my
I would
phone
love
here.
to have a copy of that.
It just had 3 reasons. One was low pay, the last one was 30%, 37%, and it was long hours. And I can't remember the middle one, and I am so sorry, but that was 50-some% also. I can forward it to Dr. Wong.
Okay, and I can look on the website. Thank you.
Do we have comparable districts, data to compare?
I
Where
don't
we're
have
at to our-
clear data to compare. There is some information out there. One of the things that I found is people are reporting differently and people are choosing not to answer certain questions. So, but then there are some people on the committee that were able to find some data that they feel are comparable, that we need to explore that. Okay, thank you.
How will the committee be appointed, and who do you see as being members of the committee? And I apologize if you went over that already.
No, that's okay. What I feel is, one is inviting some of those people that have high stakes and high commitment in the district already. We have people who participated on the 2141 team and people who participated on the teacher principal evaluation committee. There's also people that have been recommended. You know, I haven't formally asked people who have been recommended by their principals, but there's a way of getting information that way as well. I've also looked at individuals who have consistently come to different meetings and who have given input, maybe not in those formal other meetings, because we don't want to burn everybody out, but we want to get a real cross-representation. Whether you're a first-year teacher, I'd like to have a couple first-year teachers on there, a couple of second-year teachers, but then also some insights from our veterans.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Susan? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
time.
patience.
Is there a motion to establish?
Move the governing board approve establishing an advisory committee to explore retention strategies.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
That was.
Motion carries. There's no business and plant agenda items. The next item under general business is governing board ASBA policy advisories first reading. The administration is recommending that an advisory, wait a minute, sorry. The following Arizona School Board Association policy advisories are being provided for first reading. The policy advisories have changed recommendations from ASBA. Quite an extensive list.
So this evening, we have three members, Dr. Wagner, Dr. Lugo, and Scott Walmer, who are going to be presenting some of the changes in the policy services advisory. So Mr. Walmer is going to start with the information on credit cards.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I have two actually to present tonight. The first is on credit cards and the second is on purchasing procedures. The Auditor General came out with a memo some time ago, and they revised the USFR in May to include a chapter on procurement cards, and this policy is written very closely along those lines. Some of the changes that are on here, it assigns responsibility to the superintendent for this program. It requires spending limits. Our old policy had spending limits within the back pages, not in the formal policy, the regulation. It requires a user agreement, which we currently have in place. One thing we don't have in place that I noticed upon reading this was the agreement shall authorize the district to withhold wages for amounts of any improper purchase, so that's a change we'll have to make. We do have the agreement in place. I as of July, will do that myself, so anyone who gets a new card will go through a 15-minute or so in service on what's allowed, what's not allowed, when the card can be used, when it's appropriate, and when it's not, under what circumstances. When purchases can be made more efficiently, one thing that's not written here, but it's becoming more of a reality, and it's the direction we're moving, is online purchasing is becoming more sort of necessary. You know, there's fewer kind of vendors with buildings and big stocks, and a lot of stuff we buy now is technology, and it's downloadable. You don't go pick it up anywhere. That can really only be bought with a credit card. Those companies tend to not take purchase orders. So up until this point, travel, of course, is the biggest use, and that's covered here fairly extensively in these pages as well. It describes what should be on a purchase order, and that very closely mirrors what's in our in-service now. We don't allow, well, one thing we don't allow is the use of the card in restaurants. That's not mandated in here, but vendors who don't take purchase orders, emergencies, travel is what we use the cards for mostly, and for the same reason as the online stuff, airlines don't take purchase orders, etc. So it outlines what kind of things should be on the purchase order, what kind of supporting documentation should be brought back, and the methods we should use to review statements and purchase orders to make sure nothing inappropriate is purchased with the cards. So again, it mirrors very closely what we have in place now, except for that one little change that I mentioned. Any questions about that one? The second one is bidding and purchasing procedures. There's just one very small change that's included here under job order contracting. Job order contracting has been around for quite a while now. It's where we can do a bid for one type of service. Roofing is a good example, where we can do a roofing bid and award to one vendor for specific projects that we've laid out and kind of do the whole thing in one shot. The change in this policy is they assign a default limit of $1 million for a job order contracting construction service. Unless it's changed by the board, it automatically goes into $1 million. That really is it for this one.
Where it says the last sentence, is that if the board decides to change the $1 million, then we would have, we have to transmit it to ACA for inclusion in the document?
That's interesting. I expect that would be in a regulation. I only say that because that's how it was with procurement cards. So that's an assumption, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallner.
I'm going to go through my whole list, and then Dr. Lugo can go through all the G policies. So the first policy is EF-R, which is the food service policy. And essentially that's just an administrative regulation change that basically requires, because we are part of the National School Lunch Program, that we provide the same level of support for lunches served to non-free and reduced lunch students as we do to free and reduced lunch students. And by support, that really is interpreted as same quality of food and service to all students, regardless of whether they're on the program. So that's just a change in that policy. Going down to policy IHL, which is a brand new policy about teaching, teaching about religion. This was, you may remember this bill that went through, and it just authorizes any district, and this doesn't really apply to us because it's 9 through 12, but it authorizes the district to establish an elective course pertaining to the Bible's influence on Western culture in grades 9 through 12, and it also provides specific parameters regarding the content and legal requirements. It will not have much of an effect in terms of our programming at this point. Then we go to policy IHAMB, which is family life education, and in our case it would be human growth and development. That requires that any type of family life education program presents childbirth and adoption as preferred options to elective abortions. And so that is specifically stated within the policy. That also came out of statute.
That was, I'm sorry, say that.
IHAMB, Family Life Education Policy.
And that was because of the statutory change from the last legislative session?
Yes, ma'am. Then policy IHBCA, which is programs for pregnant and parenting students. That policy used to require that students and majority students and or minor students and their parents report to school officials their status in terms of pregnancy. That has been stricken from the policy, and that's a personal choice that either the student or the student with their family can make. Policy IHBE, the bilingual instruction, native language instruction. This is a small change, but it falls in under requests for waivers. It requires that the district use, the policy changes adds the term full description under waivers to ensure that districts and schools are providing parents with a full description of all programs and materials being used in bilingual SEI mainstream courses when parents are inquiring about waivers to opt out of the SEI program. Then we have a series of three that are connected. It's IJM, KD, and KHC. I'm going to read some of this to you because the basic gist of this, all three of these policies, is that the district cannot use, or schools cannot use, the viewpoint of, let me back up. We frequently are asked to distribute materials from a variety of organizations, from Little League on. These three policies are put in place to ensure that there is non-discrimination regarding religious organizations asking for distribution of materials if we are allowing distribution of other materials, and that the district cannot use the viewpoint of the materials as a judgment for distributing or not distributing those materials, right? So if we distribute the Little League materials, we have to make available the Bible study class information from the local church, and that we aren't allowed to discriminate. Part of the piece that's important about this is the third policy, KHC, talks about methods of distribution. And we have been following this for quite a while, which we don't take and hand out flyers to our kids. Those flyers are to be placed in a location where parents have access to them, and they can choose to take those flyers whether they want them or not. That way, everybody is treated the same when it comes to those flyers, and everybody has access. So that's what that third policy says. But all of them are designed to ensure that there's a non-discrimination in terms of distribution of materials out to students and their families. Policy IHBHD, which is online concurrent and correspondence courses. This is a very small change. It changes one word. It's the word or, and it changes it to and. In the section that lists requirements for students to participate in online courses. And to get that to make sense, I tried to figure out how to say that in a way that would make sense, and I finally realized I just have to read it. All it says is to receive credit towards promotion or graduation, a student participating in Arizona online instruction shall not be allowed to participate in online courses if the student fails to comply with the testing requirements and the online instruction provider fails to administer the test to at least 95% of the students participating in the provider school's online program. So that and used to be an or. So now it's both of those conditions must exist in order for that to happen. And then the last two really have to do, JICH and KFA have to do with medical marijuana. JICH is about drug and alcohol use by students. This policy basically, it does two things. It makes a small change, and then but a significant change. It adds the word distribution along with the use of use, possession, or sale of drugs and alcohol in terms of prohibitions. It also prohibits a student who is a medical marijuana card holder from possessing or using marijuana in district property or in district events. For policy KFA, which is public conduct on school property, that is the same rule as it applies to the public being on our campuses or at district sponsored events. Just because they're a medical marijuana card holder, they are not allowed to possess or use marijuana on our campuses or in our events. So those are those two policies.
Medical marijuana, you're talking about students only.
For the first policy, JICH, is talking about students. The second policy is referring to, because that's the public conduct on school property policy, it's referring to public.
Everyone, even parents or.
Correct. Not, they cannot possess or use on school property or district events.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I just want to clarify on the distribution of materials. So is that kind of like say going into a coffee shop and having a community bulletin board? It's something where we would have to make it available in some way, shape, or form to everyone if we did it.
Or no one.
Or to no one. So in other words, if we opted to distribute allow the Little League to post something, would have to allow the Ku Klux Klan?
No, within the policy, there are
Okay.
certain parameters in regards to that kind of speech and violence and hate speech and those types of things that are not allowed, that we can say no to.
Thank you.
And the person who would make the determination of no would be the superintendent?
At the site, it's the school principal, but usually we require all of those things to come through the superintendent's office for approval as well.
We're going on to policy G.
So as you are aware, policy G has a lot to do with our personnel policies. So the first one we have is policy GB, and what that policy does is it strikes the last sentence of the paragraph in that policy, because that sentence basically says that this policy won't conflict with contract, and there is how do I say this? There's legal review out there that our policy manual is a form of a contract with our teachers and our staff. So the next one is GCCD. It's regarding the military leave, and here the line that's struck is that such leave will not count as experience to advance on the salary schedule. So my understanding of the Military Leave Act is that if a person is on military leave, that should not be held against them, so they shouldn't lose their experience.
Do we have personnel that fall under that category?
Currently we don't, but last year and the year prior we did have teachers out on military leave.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Policy GCK, professional staff transfers and assignments. This has to do with the new law with ARS 15539 that's been passed based on the House bill. And if you're a teacher who falls into the lowest classification of performance for 2 consecutive years, you can't be transferred to another school. And it talks about that. And let's see. And it also talks about, just as we saw on the other slide, of trying to have that equitable distribution of the effective teachers there. So, and then professional staff duties and responsibilities, GCMF. They've added some lines that have come out of the new law. The first one, which I think all of our teachers feel, is making the learning a primary focus of the teacher's professional time. Then, let's see. Policy GCO. There are a number of changes in GCO based on the new House bill and the new laws that are passed. Again, you'll see that line of making the learning the primary focus. Then on page 41 of 84, the The district's evaluation requirement, as you know, that this year we have the opportunity to pilot our evaluation tool. And by December 31st, we need to adopt a model for the upcoming year that aligns with the framework, with 33 to 50% being based on student achievement. They also changed the labels for our categories of teachers and the classifications that moved from highly effective to effective. Then they changed the word to developing and ineffective. If you look further down on inadequacy of classroom performance, our current tool uses the term unsatisfactory on the observational tool. Now it's going to be ineffective in one or more of the classifications. So that's a significant change. And a rating of developing in 3 or more of the performance classifications. So that's a significant change as well. Additionally, on the evaluation of administrators and psychologists, the board shall make available the evaluation and performance classifications of each of the principals in the district. We do currently report that to the Arizona Department of Ed. Then there's regulations for GCORA that really very much align with the policy. There is an opportunity to choose for non-continuing teachers on page 46 of 84. We have an option 1 and an option 2. I have not yet consulted legal guidance for which one is more defendable. So I think that's something that I'd like to come back to you on which option would be recommended by our legal counsel. So there are a number of things in those regulations that I'd like to get, that especially the options clarifications on. Okay, then the next part on the medical marijuana standards, GBAB, you can see that policy has been struck. And then the GBECA, that policy has also been struck. It reverts back to the use and possession. If you look on page 76 of 84, it takes out some of those things, but it says that we will comply with the medical marijuana law. So, any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Lugo. That was first reading of ASBA policy advisories. We'll see those again next month, next meeting, on the 18th. The next item under general business is Arizona School Boards Association Top 10 Priorities for the 2013 legislative session. The agenda reflects the membership's action from the June 30th Delegate Assembly, as well as a form, and it also includes a form for the board to determine its top 10 legislative priorities that ASBA should pursue for the 2013 legislative session. Once submitted, the input from board members will be compiled by ASBA and will determine their 2013 top 10 priorities. So we've done this a variety of ways in the past, and I wanted to open it up to ideas on how you want to make the determinations of the top 10.
Hilda, do you recall how we've done this in the past? What some of those ways are? I think at one point we read them off and saw what we had.
Last year you guys picked your top 2. Each board member picked their top 2, and so that equals the top 10 priorities.
I could do that. I would have to go back. I wrote down my top 10, and I don't necessarily have notes on what they were. I just wrote the numbers. So I would.
I have.
Okay. Well, I could.
And
I have.
there's a link through board docs as well.
Yes.
Right, that's where I printed them up. I have a question. On some of them, I totally agree. I mean, you read these and it's like a candy store, you want to pick them all. I think I had 15 marked. But some of them I have questions about federal law versus what they feel the state. I mean, like advocacy for children and student needs, number 6, oppose legislation to require school districts to report and determine the immigration status of students. Dr. Boyle, am I correct in understanding that that's a federal law that we can't ask about immigration status of students? Am I correct in just assuming that? We can't ask because it's federally mandated? Okay, tell me.
I think that
Other states agree.
that is something that I think came from a Supreme Court decision, U.S. Supreme Court decision out of Texas several, I want to say in the early 80s, that schools could not make enrollment conditional upon a student's immigration status. There have been attempts to challenge that. Just because something conflicts with federal law or with precedent set by the Supreme Court does not mean the Arizona legislature won't do something.
I know, like Pennsylvania tries to get around it, that you can't register a child without a social security number. You have to be a resident to get a social security number, so they try to get around it that way. Because I dealt with Pennsylvania with some of my clients' cases and getting it. But I was just wondering, some of them, they sound great and all that, but I was thinking, I mean, we're one of many school boards, but I would like to get the biggest bang for the buck. You know, that's just my opinion on things like that.
Nat, maybe since you follow the legislature more closely
Right.
than the rest of us, are any of the things on the agenda, do we anticipate challenges coming up, certain challenges coming up to education or certain areas next session?
I know there are some things on here having to do with immigration, and I know that that has been, was an issue, not this past legislative session, but the previous one, under former Senate President Russell Pierce, who lost his comeback bid and will not be the president of the Arizona Senate next year. That does not necessarily mean that the current Senate President, Steve Pierce, will stay in office or that he won't be challenged. That will depend on the outcome, not just of the elections we had August 28th, but also November 6th. I would tend to say, well, we're not going to have someone as single-handedly pushing immigration measures as we had with when Russell Pierce was the Senate President. So for me personally, those are still areas that I have strong opinions on, but which I'm more willing to let some other things kind of float up to the top. And I noticed that looking through here, some of them are very specific, whereas some of them are more general. And if you, well, I would be willing to go into specifics of things I support more than I don't. I would tend to choose ones on here that are more general because they're more all-encompassing rather than having to choose from however many 100 and some odd there are here.
That's good advice. I think no matter what, I'd encourage us to make a decision tonight because the next governing board meeting we have is quite a packed agenda. So I don't know if we each just want to take a few minutes to look through, come up with.
I know in years past and I don't remember if it was effective or if it took us longer, but we all listed out our top 10 and then.
We have done that because some of you guys have the same one.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you have yours now or if you want.
I do have my 10 if I can read those off if you want. I had the letter I, or 1, and then number 1. And then I had the letter I, number 4 again. And then I had the double I, or the 2, and then 4 underneath that. So then I had the triple I 1, the triple I 8, the triple I or Roman numeral 3, number 9, Roman numeral 4, number 1, Roman numeral 4, number 10, Roman numeral 5, number 1, and Roman numeral 5, number 9.
So are we all in agreement that the way we'll decide this year is we each come up with our top 10 and then we'll compare the list? Is that how we want to do it?
I think that would make a good start if others are okay with that.
I'm fine with that, because I think it was better than us each just picking two, as we can have a bigger discussion. Okay, so we'll take a few minutes to do that. Please pardon us, audience. Thank you for your patience.
I said 5-9.
Unless you're ready, you can, if you're ready, you can say them off to Hilda. Are you ready, Hilda?
1 minute.
Okay.
Correct, 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna go backwards, Hilda.
Okay.
Number 7, section 7, number 9. Section 6, number 2.
Oh, section, what did you say, 6, number 2? Okay.
Right. And section 5, big one, all-day kindergarten, number 18. And section 5, number 4. Section 4, number 21. And section 4, number 10. How many is that? I have quite a few.
6, I think.
Section 3, number 4. Section 2, number 2. And section 2, number 3. And of course, section 1, number 6.
Tabor.
Tabor.
Oh, I thought I did.
It comes up every year.
And it does.
It's okay, I did it for you.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering what I put on there instead.
Are you ready?
I just have 3.
Okay.
1, 4, 2, 3, and 4, 1.
1, 4.
1, 4, 2, 3, and 4, 1.
6.1. Section 5, number 2 and 34. Two and 34. Hold on. Oh, 3 and 4, excuse me. Section 1, number 1 and 4. Section 2, number 1, 10, and 14. It's hard just to make 10. And section 3, number 1. We didn't all sound good during the ASB. Some things were contentious. I represented Creighton at the ASBA Delegate Assembly, and there were only a couple contentious issues. It was mostly rural versus urban issues. Okay.
We have 7 and have more than one vote.
Okay. Okay, so do you want to read the 7 that everyone agrees on?
It would be encourage, assist, and provide adequate financial support of the curriculum and instructional needs.
That's on one.
That's 1-1. Do you want me to read them or can you just say 1-1?
Read
The numbers?
Yeah.
Can you read part of it so we get the gist of it?
Okay.
So the audience also gets the gist of
Well, I
it?
just read it all the stuff. I mean, if there's like, I know there's one in particular, but,
Okay.
an instructional needs of Arizona Public Schools to ensure college and career readiness of all students. 1-4, fund programs to prepare and support children and families for success in public schools. 2-3, oppose any effort not initiated by local school districts through their governing boards or voters to consolidate or unify school districts. 3-1, foster continuous improvement of standards and assessments adopted by the State Board of Education, including the Common Core. 4-1, advocate structural change to Arizona's tax system to ensure adequate funding for public education while opposing any change to the existing property tax structure unless a comprehensive tax reform proposal is implemented to adequately address the needs of public education. 4-10, oppose the various taxpayer Bill of Rights legislation. 5-4, adequately fund English language learners. And that is 7.
What, my suggestion is if we adopt the 7 and we just talk about the next 3, what other ones did we come up with?
How many
Other ones?
other ones did we choose?
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
We had 5, 18,
11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16,
Oh.
17.
I don't know, how about maybe if we could each suggest one or something like that and have a discussion about it? And if someone opposes greatly, we won't do it.
Okay, well, Robin did recommend, I'm sorry, which number was it that addressed kindergarten?
All day kindergarten.
What are your thoughts on that agenda item?
I certainly support that. I don't, I guess it would depend on the makeup of the legislature. I'm not sure if that is something that is addressed by the Quality Education and Jobs Initiative that's on the ballot, and I don't know if anyone out there would know. But if that's something that's on the ballot, it may not be something that the legislature would deal with. I personally don't see the legislature in this next legislative session doing that, but I certainly support it and don't oppose us going on the record for supporting it, whether they end up doing that or not.
That was one of my picks too, I support it.
Okay, so are we all in agreement we could add that as the 8th?
Sure.
Okay. 2 more, any other recommendations?
Most of mine, it looks like other people mentioned, but
Was under funding, section 5 was number 2, one that we chose.
You chose, but it
I
was the
chose
one
it.
that.
Okay, then I'd suggest that we include addressing issues related to school capital, including minimum building standards, new construction, building renewal, soft capital. So we've seen how difficult it's been to build a new school when our schools are more than 50 years old with the reductions that have come down from the state legislature.
What number is it again?
That is section 5, number 2. There might be one that's broader that encompasses those issues, and I'm open to that as well. But number 2 just jumped out at me because of the experience we've had here in Creighton and with our election not bringing in money.
And one of the ones that you mentioned, I think you mentioned, Tiffany, and I don't recall if anyone else did, was changing the override to being called a local effort.
I think I did, I like that
Okay.
one. Since it doesn't
Where
apply
is
to
that?
us, and I was looking for it, it doesn't apply to us due to the fact that our override did not pass. And a lot of people thought it was extra, whereas it was capital.
And it's confusing to voters.
Yes, it's very helpful.
421.
Yeah, change the designation of override election to local effort election.
I don't know if that's the magic bullet in terms of how you change the wording, if that's the best
Right.
thing, but I do think, I'm concerned that there are efforts to make it more and more difficult to pass overrides and local efforts. And I would like to see us keep that as an option unless the state wants to, do more to equalize us. In which case, I'd be willing to take extra money without that process, but
I like the 21, and I like the one she mentioned, I think the 10. 21 and 2 that Tiffany was talking about.
421, which was the override elections to local effort, and I'm sorry, section 4, number 2. Suppose any measure that uses state monies to fund private schools, including the,
No, 5.2.
5.2.
Address issues related to school capital issues,
Oh.
including minimum building standards.
And yeah, I guess that is important since we haven't had things like building renewal funded. We haven't had, there's no new school construction basically that's being paid for by the state. And at some point we're going to have to be concerned about that.
So we're okay with both of those, adding those to the legislative agenda? Okay.
I move the governing board approve the determined top 10 priorities to be submitted to ASBA from the 2013 legislative session.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. The next section is future agenda items. We have quite a busy agenda next week, and it'll be exciting that we'll be out at one of the schools. Let's see, does anyone have any items they want to add to future agendas? Seeing no further issues, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move the governing board adjourned.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.